Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'll try not to talk too much Canadian, eh? I'm an alcoholic. My name is Eric. My sobriety date is July 12th, 1993. I'm a member of the Three Legacy Group in Barrie, Ontario. We meet Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays for a closed discussion meeting. Thursdays for an open speaker meeting. It's about an hour north of Toronto, and if you're ever up in that area, come and see us. You'll get a good meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a solution-based group. We started that group about 2 years ago. We get about 100 people out to our open meetings, about 60 or 70 out to our closed. You'll get a warm cup of coffee, and you'll certainly get a nice handshake when you get to the door. So if you're ever up in our area, come and see us. I am fired up.
Yeah, baby.
I am fired up. And I hope you guys are fired up too, because this has been great. Do you guys, I get to do this a little bit here and there, and you know, Eric called me about, I don't know, I'd say 5 months ago or something, and he said, you want to come do this? And Southern California, come on, I mean, do you want to come do this? Sure. And you know, but it always sounds like a good idea at the time, doesn't it, eh, you know? And then I get up here and all I want to do is puke. You know, it's the same way all the time, every time this happens. And then I get rolling and everything like that. I'd like to thank the committee, and the reason I do that is I've chaired one of these things in Toronto. We have one that's about 3,000 people, and the work that goes into these things really is a year-round commitment. People put their heart and soul into it. It's certainly one of the most gratifying things I've ever done, and but it's a lot of work. And I'd like to thank Kathy. I'd like to thank Ken, Julianne, of course. She's fired up, I'll tell you that right now.
Yes, she is.
And I'd really like to thank my host, Barry. Boy, he's gone way beyond the call of duty. You really have, Bear. And I'm fortunate that I got to, I only hear about these things on TV shows and movies, and I got to go to Venice Beach and Santa Barbara and Malibu Beach, right where the Rockford Files was and all that. And it was just fantastic. And Barry, I'd just like to thank you so much for taking so good care of me and Mike. So thank you. I'd like to thank my friend and a guy sponsor, Mike, for coming with me. He is celebrating 5 years of sobriety today. So, and it's all because of me. Even get myself every once in a while. I think I'm a little funny, eh? So, again, just really privileged and honored to be here. And I don't say that, and I don't say it from a podium because it sounds good. I say it because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love what it's done for me. I love what it's done for my family. I love to see people recover from the disease of alcoholism. When they come in here and they are broken, and there is nothing left, and they are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they are willing to take actions that are totally against their nature. Because I'm a real big believer that, you know what? If you have a problem with God or you have a problem with a higher power, when you're beaten up enough, you'll come to believe in just about anything. you know, and that was my case. I don't take myself all that seriously in AA. One thing I've come to know about alcoholics, they don't have opinions, they just draw strong conclusions. And I'm no different. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was at a meeting in Toronto, and I was speaking at this meeting, and I was sitting there, and about 5 minutes into my talk, a guy in the front row sort of looked like Larry right here. And about 5 minutes into my talk, he started to snore a little bit. And it really got me off my game a little bit, eh? And I'm like, where was this? What was this? What happened? Where was I? All that. 15 minutes into my talk, he's got a honker going. Like, I mean, he is snoring up something big time, eh? And I'm just all over the place. And all I want to do is sit down by this time. Worst talk I've ever given. 30 minutes into my talk, he's got a Fred Flintstone snore going on. And it is driving me up the wall. And finally, I said to the guy beside him, I said, could you please wake him up? Some guy yells from the back, you wake him up, you put him to sleep. So I don't take myself all that seriously. I was at a GSR conference about 6 months ago, and some guy comes up to me, he says, you know, I really, really enjoyed your talk. Not much substance to it, but I really enjoyed the delivery. So, you know, I just don't take myself so seriously in Alcoholics Anonymous because nobody really cares anyways, you know, so what the heck. Keeping in the words of Dr. Bob, keep the Freudian complex to the scientific mind. AA's values of simplicity must prevail, and they do. I was down in Cleveland, Ohio when I was a year and a half sober. There was a man down there called Jack Sullivan. Jack was a good old boy from Louisville, Kentucky. And he had a friend named Wino Joel from Tyler, Texas. And I don't know if any of you have ever read those 20 questions that are on that sheet that say you're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. Well, they were written by a psychologist at a Johns Hopkins University. And Jack and Joe used to get a little pissed off that a professional man would be calling an alcoholic. So he decided to write a few of their own questions. You guys ahead of me? And the first one was, have you ever had the roof of your mouth sunburned? Have you ever been arrested while in jail? Have you ever been run over by your own car while driving? And probably the granddaddy of them all, have you mastered the art of puking out of a moving vehicle without any of it coming back at you? And as you look around the rooms of AA, people are going, yeah. That makes a lot of sense to you. You're in the right place. And I got this little story. I don't know, any of you guys, have any of you been to a world convention? Unbelievable, eh? And we had that world convention in Toronto in 2005, and I know a couple people here went to that. And I'm going to tell you a little story, and I know it's a true story because an alcoholic told me. Now, hey, there's a lot of people out there that think when our lips are moving, we're lying. But this was a true story. High up guy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think he owns AA or something like that, eh? And he told me this story. And what they do is they have a press conference a couple weeks before the conference with the mayor of the host city. And it happened to be at that time Mayor David Miller, who was our mayor at that time. And they had sitting there and they asked him a bunch of questions. And this one reporter gets right up in his face and he says, Mr. Mayor, we have 45 to 50,000 alcoholics coming to Toronto for 4 days. He says, Mr. Mayor, do you think Alcoholics Anonymous works? And the mayor shot back and he said, I sure hope so, or this city's in big trouble. AA works just fine. Any Al-Anons in here tonight? Oh, I love the Al-Anons, eh? Yeah, love the Al-Anons. Just great people, sister program, unbelievable. This is another story I got told, same fella actually. And I know this is a true story as well. And it's about this Al-Anon lady, black belt Al-Anon, eh? Like, I mean, she is into this program. And she has this husband that keeps on going back in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And finally what happens after a little while is the guy ends up dying. And what she did is she had him cremated. And then what she did is she mixed his ashes with some marijuana. And she smoked them. And for the next couple years, she went around the country saying, that's the best that sucker ever made me feel in 25 years of marriage. And I know that's a true story because an alcoholic told me. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous is the craziest place around. It really is. Do you see people come into this program and try and figure AA out? You know, they want to know exactly what the word in step 2 means, dictionary meaning. They want to know, like, what, amends and stuff. Exactly all these words that they want to know, and they want to try and figure AA out. You know, I've never met anybody dumb enough for Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've met a lot of people that are way too smart for AA. Do you guys realize, and you know, they sit there and they try and figure AA, and the bottom line is you can't figure a miracle out. AA is a miracle, and you can't figure it out. Do you guys realize we read the same things every day at a meeting? We read the 12 steps, we read the 12 traditions, we read different kinds of readings out of the big book. But basically at every meeting, we read the same thing. And I've often thought if you're to bring an earth person from the outside, sit them down in an AA meeting for 7 days straight, reading the same thing over and over and over again. At the end of that 7 days, they'd look at you and go, are you people stupid? Do you not get this thing? Like, is it that difficult? And then they'll start asking questions like, what is AA all about? Well, you come here, you stop drinking and all that, and you get involved in this thing, like you set up chairs and, you get involved with making coffee and all that kind of stuff. And after a while, you get to do things outside the group. And then you do these things that we call the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, how do you do them? Well, you get yourself a sponsor. Well, what's a sponsor? Well, a sponsor sort of guides you in your new way of life, sort of like a mentor. He teaches you how to set up the chairs straight. Okay? Very important to the old timer, very important. They don't want to be too off at all, okay? Instead of putting 9 scoops of coffee in the coffee machine, you got to put 10 in there. So these are things we have to learn as we go along. He guides you when you start to go outside and do service in the group. And then when it gets time to doing the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, he's done the steps or she's done the steps, and they guide you through this new way of life. What's your sponsor like? Great guy? Great guy. Been in jail 12 times. Been in the nut house 6 times. Been divorced 4 times. And he's my sponsor, and I listen to everything he says. Absolutely crazy. The one thing I've come to understand, if you come in here to Alcoholics Anonymous and you have absolutely no more plans for your life, and you have absolutely no more ideas for your life, where your life has become completely unmanageable, and you're ready to listen to somebody that's done this thing and guide you through your new way of life, and don't ask a whole bunch of questions, just do it. For some reason, my life changes. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to a selfish, self-centered alcoholic. But if I'm beaten up enough, I'll come to believe in anything, and I'll come to do anything I want. I'm a real big believer that most people don't get drunk over the first half of the first step. We don't come in here because we had a bad weekend. We come in here because there's something seriously wrong with our drinking. I really believe that most people get drunk over the second half of the first step because they continue to manage their lives. They continue to think that they still know something. Think about it, folks. We managed our lives into Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my best thinking, is that's where that got me. I'm powerless over alcohol. I can't drink. My life is unmanageable. I can't stay sober, And that's the reality to it. I knew there was something wrong with my drinking long before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. Would I have said I'm powerless? No, I would have said I'm struggling with the bottle a little bit. But the reality is, until I was willing to give up management of my life, 51% of this thing called my life to Alcoholics Anonymous and God, and keep 49 because I got to do the legwork, my life was never going to change. The one thing I've come to realize in AA is victims do not get better. Victims stay sick and they die an inch a day for years and years and years. There's nothing wrong with going back and looking in our lives and finding out why that we got from here to here, but the bottom line is that if we stay there, we die. we die. Until I was able to take full responsibility for my sad lot in life, I was never going to get better in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's just the reality to it. Has anybody ever told you you drink too much? If you're an alcoholic of my type, you've never drinking too much in your life. My problem is I can't drink enough, and if you can't drink enough, you'll never drink too much. You ever been out with social drinkers? Isn't that a blast, eh? Huh? It's like 6 of them sitting around a table having a couple scoops, you know, and the waitress will come up to them and say, would you like another one? And they'll say something like this, no, thank you, I'm starting to feel it. That's alcohol abuse, that's what that is, I'll tell you that right now. Starting to feel it. That's when I'm just getting going. It's one thing I've come to understand about social drinkers. Social drinkers do not have a terrible self-image of who they are. Social drinkers are not ill at ease all the time. Social drinkers' environment does not scare them to death. Social drinkers are not full of fear. They are not full of shame, guilt, and remorse. They are not restless, irritable, and discontent. And so when they start to feel a change going on in their life, by a couple drinks, they stop. Why? Because they're quite happy with who they are and they don't want their environment to change. I'm an alcoholic. I can't stand myself. I have a terrible self-image of who I am. My environment scares me to death. I am ill at ease all the time. I've got so much shame, guilt, and remorse in my system. I am restless, irritable, and discontent. And when I take a couple drinks of alcohol, something happens. And I feel like I have the world, everything looks good. As a matter of fact, when I drink alcohol, the promises in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous come true. They do. When I have 1 or 2 drinks of alcohol, I find a new happiness and a new freedom, absolutely. 3 or 4 drinks of alcohol, financial insecurity just goes out the door. It is gone. 7 or 8 drinks of alcohol, I intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me. All the time. And when I have 9 or 10 drinks of alcohol, I know that alcohol is doing for me what I cannot do for myself. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. If that happens to you when you drink, you are going to continue to drink. The only problem with that is alcohol gives me the illusion that all that stuff is coming true in my life. And then I wake up the next day and I feel that guilt and I feel that remorse and I feel that shame and the phone rings. And I don't know what I did last night. Part of me wants to know, the other part of me doesn't want to know. And I pick up the phone and I find out it wasn't good. And this vicious circle just keeps on going on and on and on. And the only way I know how to get rid of that is just to have a couple more drinks of alcohol so I don't have to think of who and what I've become. So I don't have to think of who and what I've become. And the reality is, at the end of the day, when I quit drinking, probably the last 3 or 4 years, it wasn't even doing that anymore. You see, it says in our book, alcohol used to be a luxury, and now it's a necessity. I need to drink. And if I don't find some kind of substitute, and as it says in our book again, the only substitute that they know is Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I don't find something that's going to replace that, I'm in trouble, you know? It says, as I said in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship we crave. We crave. I've always been looking for something, you know? I came to my first meeting on July 11th, 1993, and I didn't come here to get sober. My brother Paul was 4.5 years sober at that time, and a friend of his named Margaret was getting a 1-year medallion at the Bayview Group. And I want to talk a little bit about the power in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to talk how God works through people in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm a huge believer that really an hour in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous can change somebody's life like that. Like that. And I came to this meeting, and that meeting that night, I was so physically sick. I was spiritually sick, didn't know it at that time. I was mentally sick, didn't know it at that time. But I knew I was so physically sick that day. And I was doing all those things alcoholics do when they withdraw from alcohol. I was shaking, I was sweating, I was doing all those things. I was able to have 2 beers that day because I couldn't get any more down. I was just so physically sick, and it was coming up. And my brother Paul really wanted me to go to that meeting that night. And Paul had never asked me to go to Alcoholics Anonymous before. You see, Paul sobered up when he was 26 years old, and I was 22 and a half years old. And you know what my crazy thinking was? Is I have another 3.5 years of good drinking before I have to turn myself into you people. That's the way I thought. And he had never said anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, but he wanted me to come to that meeting because Margaret was getting her 1-year medallion, and Margaret had been in and out of AA for an awful long time. And he wanted me to come because I started to get to know Margaret because she was at the house a lot, and he wanted me to come. And isn't it weird? The worst thing I thought I could have done to myself was come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Turns out to be the best thing that I ever did for myself. Isn't that weird? And it continues to be that way sometimes in AA. I still think I know what's good for me. You know, the management of my life. I'll continue to management until I surrender those times again. I get myself in jackpots. And I ended up going to that meeting that night. And in Toronto, the Bayview group at that time was a Sunday night, and there was a huge meeting. 200 people at its open meetings. And I know that's probably just a small discussion meeting here in California, but in Toronto, it was a huge meeting. And there's 2 things that happened to me that night. And if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I pray that this happens to you too. The first thing that happened to me is when I walked through the doors of the Bayview group, there were 3 people on each side of the door saying, "Welcome to AA, we're glad to see you." And I don't know about you, but I hadn't been welcomed anywhere for an awful long time. And so when those people first said that to me, a little hope was born. And I really believe probably the most important job at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is those people sitting at the door saying, "Welcome to AA, we're glad to see you." Because an in-depth version of the 4th step really isn't going to do them a heck of a lot of good at that time. But a nice warm handshake saying, "Welcome to AA." And so for the first time in an awful long time, there was a little bit of hope that I had. The second thing that happened to me that night, I saw people that night that were excited about being sober. And I don't know about you, but I was never excited about being sober. Because drinking was my solution. Drinking is what made me fit into this world. Drinking made me feel bulletproof. I couldn't imagine a life without drinking. It just seemed completely impossible. Couldn't do it. And I ended up at that meeting, and I sat in the front row, and what we do in Toronto when we have medallions, they have a 1-year medallion, and the medallion recipient gets to pick all the people that read stuff and stuff like that. So a whole bunch of people got up, and they said a whole bunch of nice things about Margaret and all that. And what they do in Toronto, too, is the secretary reads the announcements, and she gives out chips for certain amounts of sobriety under a year, 9 months, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. And so they said a bunch of nice things about Margaret. Then the secretary got up and she did her announcements. And you got to understand that my whole family was sitting in the front row. My mother was there. My brother Scott was there. A friend of my brother Scott's was right there. And I was sitting right there. And Marlene, who was doing it that night, she got up to do the chips. And she said, "Is there anybody here with 9 months of sobriety? Anybody here with 6 months, 3 months, and 1 month?" And then it got to that desire chip, where people come up and anybody that wants to stop drinking just for today. And Marlene got up there and she said, "Is there anybody that wants a desire chip and just stop drinking for today?" And my whole family looked down at me. But I didn't want to do anything about it, because if you're anything like me, drinking is my solution. Drinking is what makes me fit into this world. Drinking makes me bulletproof. And I can't imagine a life without drinking. It just seemed completely impossible. And that meeting went on that night. And the lady that spoke that night, her name was Terry. And Terry was a counselor at the Renaissance Center in Toronto. It's an AA-based everybody that works there has to be alcoholic, and it's a 12-step based program. And she got up there that night, and she got me. She got me. She didn't talk a lot about her drinking. What she talked about is how she felt when she wasn't drinking. And she got me. She talked about shame. She talked about guilt. She talked about remorse. She talked about fear. She talked about being restless, irritable, and discontent. And she talked about something that made sense to a guy like me. She talked about hiding booze in her own apartment when she was the only one that lived there. You see, I get that. I get that. And about halfway through that meeting that night, I started to catch just a little bit of alcoholism. Not much, just a little bit. And when that meeting was over that night, I was a full-blown alcoholic with the disease of alcoholism, and folks, I haven't had a drink since. That's what one meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous can do to a guy like me. It says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, armed with the facts about ourselves, not necessarily about AA. We can generally win the confidence of another alcoholic over within a few hours, where people have been trying for years and years and years. And that's exactly what happened to me that night. You see, something happened to me that night, some kind of spiritual experience, some kind of spiritual awakening, some kind of psychic change. And I didn't realize that till about 2 years later, because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, folks. It takes me, as a matter of fact, a lot of the people I hung around with before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, they weren't all that sharp either. I heard a speaker say this once. He said, you know, the people I used to hang around with, we'd say, look at the dead bird. We'd all look up, you know. You know? Wasn't all that sharp. And I went up to a friend of my brother's that night. His name was Eldon. And I said, Eldon, I think I have a problem with booze and I want to do something about it. And he said, you know, you're going to have to quit all that other stuff. And I said, I know, I'm going to have to do that too. You see, that night, folks, I saw myself the way my mom saw me, saw myself the way my dad saw me, saw myself the way my brother saw me. But the whole key to that evening is I saw myself that way. And I knew I was going to be okay. I knew there was something here for me. I'm going to give you a little rundown about my family, because I come from, just as Jim was saying, I come from two of the best parents you could ever ask for. Two of the most unselfish people in the world you could ever ask for. They're still alive today, 82 and 80 years old. And they are just fantastic people and would do anything for their kids. They gave us everything we needed, not everything we wanted, but they gave us everything we needed. You know, and most of all, they gave us the love. I have 3 older brothers. My brother Barry's a Baptist minister. He also teaches at a Baptist college in Cambridge, Ontario, about an hour away from Toronto. He's got his master's degree. Barry was a guy that probably had some alcoholic symptoms when he was younger. When he was 21 years old, he quit drinking and found God. Simple as that. And he's a doctor today, and he does all this different stuff, and it's just amazing. Then I have a brother named Scott. And everybody's got one of these in their family, eh? Scott makes you sick. He just does everything so well, you know? He's a golden boy, you know? He just does everything so well. You know, he's a guy that left home when he was 16 years old to go play junior hockey in Kingston, Ontario. Played 3 years there, just accelerated, did really well. When he left junior hockey, he signed a professional hockey contract with the New York Islanders. He played in the New York Islanders farm system for a few years. He played about 25 games in the NHL. When he was 25, 26 years old, he decided to quit hockey because he wasn't going to make it to the NHL. And every year he came home and went to school in the off season from hockey. And he had a year left to get his bachelor's degree. He went and got that. And then after that, he went to law school, and he graduated law school in the top 3% of his class, and worked at this firm downtown, probably one of the best firms in Toronto, worked there for a couple of years. And then he realized that he still had a passion for hockey, and he ended up being the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers farm team in Cape Breton, Ontario. stayed there for a couple years. He ended up going to, moving that team to Hamilton. And when Kevin Lowe, who was the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers, was hired, he hired my brother Scott to be his assistant general manager. About 4 years ago, Scott was hired to be the general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus, Ohio, and he's been there for 5 years. Probably the dream of his life. Only 30 people get to be general managers in the National Hockey League. He's got 3 beautiful children. He's got a lovely wife. He makes more than a 6-figure salary. And every once in a while, I try and get him to admit it all the fun he missed out on that I was having. But just won't do it. He just won't do it. And there's my brother Paul, who's my hero. Paul was the guy that brought Alcoholics Anonymous into our house. He was the guy that I watched for 4.5 years make a 180-degree turn in his life. I saw him gain the respect of my parents back. I saw him gain the respect of my brothers back, of his friends back, of his employers back. I got to watch this right in front of my face. When they talk about this program being an attraction rather than promotion, it certainly is. Because Paul just didn't say much about Alcoholics Anonymous, but Paul showed me what Alcoholics Anonymous is all about. Because I got to watch it. We lived together, and I got to see it. And he said probably one of the greatest moments beside the birth of his 2 children was watch his baby brother pick up a desire chip in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, that's a good deal. Where do you get stuff like that, you know? And I got to see that. So he's really my hero. You know, he's the guy that brought it into me. Paul doesn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous as much anymore. I'm hoping one day he'll come back a little more and we'll get him back into this program. But he's 22, 23 years sober now. And he's been going through a difficult time, and I hope he will get back here. So that's a rundown of my family. I don't talk a lot about my drinking because most of the stuff I remember never happened. But I'll tell you a little story that describes my drinking to a T. It's about an alcoholic, and he's walking down the beach one day, all hammered up walking down this beach, Walking down the beach, and he kicks the sand and kicks a bottle, and he picks up the bottle, opens up the cork, and out comes a 9-foot genie. And the genie says, I'm here to give you 3 wishes of anything you'd like. And the alcoholic goes, I'll have an everlasting bottle of whiskey. Bang, there it is. Puts it up to his mouth for 15 seconds, puts it down, still full to the top. Well, you know the way we are. We don't trust people too much. He says, I'm going to haul on this sucker for 30 seconds. Hauls on that sucker for 30 seconds, puts it down, still full to the top. He says, okay, I'm going to haul on this baby for 1 minute. He hauls on that baby for 1 minute, puts it down, still full to the top. The genie goes, do you believe me now? And the alcoholic goes, yeah, I believe you. And the genie goes, you got 2 more wishes. And without a beat, the alcoholic said, I'll have 2 more of these. That's the way I drank, folks. It's as simple as that, you know? I'm not a big guy that's going to talk a lot about my drinking because everything, you know, we know everything there is to know about drinking. Thank God for the people that taught me about recovery. And that's what I'm going to talk about here tonight. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I pray that you find out what your problem is. Because I really believe, and I heard a gentleman talk about it today, and I see him over there, that you can't get onto the solution until you figure out what your problem is. I'm a huge believer in that. And thank God for strong sponsorship. If there's one thing we're lacking in Alcoholics Anonymous today is strong solution-based sponsorship, you know? And I had strong solution-based sponsorship. And so if you're new here and you know, you have to find out what your problem is. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, even though my brother Paul had been here for 4.5 years, do you know what my idea of an alcoholic was? Some guy sitting in downtown Toronto with a long coat, with a long hair, with a long beard, with a paper bag, with a long jacket, sucking juice out of it. That was my idea of an alcoholic. I had no idea what an alcoholic was. And in the first 52 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it simply describes 2 things. It describes what happens to Eric when he has a drink and what happens to Eric when he doesn't have a drink. And in the doctor's opinion, it outlines our disease so well. It happens to 1 out of every 10 people that pick up a drink of alcohol. Once I take a drink, I develop this thing called the phenomenon of craving, the allergy of the body. Once I start drinking, I can't stop. And that had been proven to me over and over and over again. The only 2 times I ever stopped drinking is if there was no booze left or if there was no money left. As a matter of fact, if there was only 2 beers in the fridge, wouldn't even want it. This is even before I know I'm alcoholic, because I knew it wouldn't even take the edge off. I heard a speaker say one time, if I could give you a pill that would make you a social drinker, you wouldn't take it. I completely agree with that. I had absolutely no interest in social drinking whatsoever. My other problem is, once I stop drinking, all I can think about is where am I going to get my next drink? And that's what the doctor called the obsession of the mind. It's like a big fat idea that outweighs every other idea in my head till I say something like this, which I'm sure none of you people here in Westlake Convention have ever said. This time, it's going to be different. This time, I'm going to drink like a real person and just be going. And I never could, you know? Powerless over alcohol, I can't drink. My life is unmanageable, can't stay sober. And my other problem with my illness is the spiritual malady. And I really believe, and I've never heard it put better than my sponsor, Butch's late sponsor, Bob Dobson. He said, alcoholism is a soul sickness, gangrene of the soul. And once we straighten out spiritually, we'll straighten out physically, we'll straighten out mentally. And that's been my experience here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And in those first 52 pages, they tell you the same thing over and over and over again, because they know who they're talking to. They're talking to alcoholics. We need to hear this thing over and over and over again. You know, I can remember going to my sponsor. He said to me, Eric, what do you think AA is all about? I said, Jerry, it's about not drinking. He said, no, Eric. Alcoholics Anonymous has very little to do with not drinking. It has everything to do with learning how to live without drinking. That's the key. He said, Eric, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. I said, Jerry, you're a bad drinker. First drink that gets you drunk. Are you kidding me? We are members of the Bayview Country Club, and the country club is an alcoholic's paradise. Because what you do at a country club, it's a private club. They don't care how old you are. They don't care, it's a private club. They don't care how old you are. And the beautiful thing, and you can sign your name and number. And I still remember the number, H920. And the beautiful thing about a country club is they send the bill to your dad at the end of the month. It's a great deal for a couple practicing alcoholics. And I can remember going over to the Bayview Country Club when I'm 16 years old. I would go over there, 16 years old, on a Monday night to watch Monday night football, school night, to play cards in the card room. Early stages of alcoholism? Probably. But if somebody had to come up to me at that time and said, Eric, you're in the early stages of alcoholism, you know what I would have told them? Yeah, but I'm having fun. And as long as an alcoholic's having fun, they're never going to quit drinking. As long as we think we're going to have fun, we are never going to quit drinking. It has to get to that problems plus problems plus problems, all the good days are gone. And so I'd go over and I'd have B-52s and I'd drink wine and I'd drink beer and I'd roll home at about 11:30 at night on a school night, and I'd go down, and my parents were separated at this time. And on the 6th or 7th of every month, my dad would get that chit bill from the club. And I think they had to deliver it pure later because it must have been that thick. Me and my brother both practicing. And I'd get a call on the 6th or 7th of every month, and he'd say to me, Eric, you can't keep doing this to me. This is costing me way too much money. And you know what I'd say to my dad? I'd say, Dad, I promise I'll never do that again. And you want to know what, folks? I meant it. I meant it. I didn't want to do that kind of stuff to my dad. My mom and dad had given me everything I needed, not everything we wanted, and most of all, they gave us a love. But alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And about 2 months later, I'd start thinking of myself. And the worst thing an alcoholic can do is think too much. And I'd start thinking to myself, and I'd say something like this, which I'm sure none of you spiritual giants have ever said. I wonder what he really meant by that. He didn't mean stop drinking forever. He meant let things cool off a bit, and I'd rationalize it and I'd justify it just to the way I wanted to see it. 2 months later, I went to Bayview Country Club for one drink. I left Bayview Country Club about 8 hours later, so drunk, so disgustingly drunk, I made an ass of myself and I made an ass of my family, and I didn't want to do that. That's what one drink of alcohol does to a guy like me. I'm coaching AAA hockey. I'm 26 years old. I'm taking over an Ontario championship hockey team. That's like a state championship hockey team. I've taken this team, we're 11-1 in November. And I get called into the president's office at that time, and he says, Eric, I gotta tell you, there's a lot of people complaining about your drinking, and I gotta let you go. Well, alcoholics are good conners too. We can con our way just about out of anything, any kind of thing I can con my way out of. I can lie like music to a composer. You just tell me, just back me into a corner, I'll tell you what you wanna hear. And he said, okay, Eric, you can stay here under 2 conditions. I said, Dave, what are those 2 conditions? He said, you must seek professional help. No problem, Dave. I'll seek professional help. Absolutely no intention of seeking professional help whatsoever. This is the thinking. You know what I was thinking at this time? Dave, you should seek professional help. That's what I was thinking. And the second thing he said to me that night, he said, Eric, you can't drink at Double Rink Arena's bar. Do you guys have any idea the size of Toronto? About 5 million people, GTA. Huge place. And all he's saying to me is, Eric, don't drink in one bar in Toronto. No problem, Dave. 2 weeks later, I'd start thinking to myself again, and I'd say something like this. I wonder what he really meant by that. He didn't mean stop drinking there forever. He meant let the heat cool off a little bit, and I'd rationalize it and I'd justify it just to the way I wanted to see it. 2 weeks later, we had a game at 11:30 at Double Rink Arena's bar at Double Rink Arena's. At 1 o'clock, I was in Double Rink Arena's bar for one drink. I left Double Rink Arena's bar at about 8 o'clock that night, so drunk, so disgustingly drunk. I made an ass of myself and I made an ass of my family, and I didn't want to do that. That's what one drink of alcohol does to a guy like me. And folks, those are 2 stories out of hundreds and hundreds, dozens of stories, I shouldn't say hundreds, but dozens of different stories. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous and you build up a bright outlook upon you and your family, and you continue to tear that down on a senseless number of sprees, and you fail to recognize without sufficient force the pain and humiliation of a day, a week, or a month ago, and you continue to do that over and over and over again, and you're not alcoholic, what are you? What are you? You would do well to contract this disease. This is the only illness in the world that if you catch it and you do something about it, you get better. If you don't catch it, you die an inch a day for years and years and years. Alcoholism is the loneliest disease around. It separates us from our families. It separates us from ourselves. It separates us from Almighty God. That's the reality of this disease, you know? I'm a big believer, and this is just my opinion again, and as I said, I have my own opinions. I certainly don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. But I really believe in my sponsorships that goes down the line. I really believe the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is geared towards 3 things. The first thing the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is geared towards is to find a power that will solve your problem. It says in our book, the main objective of this book is to find a power that will solve your problem. And the beautiful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is we're not even telling you what to believe in. All we're saying is come to believe in something that might be a little bigger than you. Probably the greatest thing that happened to AA is in Bill's story, is when Abby Thatcher comes to see Bill Wilson. And Abby Thatcher phones Bill Wilson up and he says, Bill, I'd like to come see you, something's happened to me. Abby Thatcher comes to Bill's door, knocks on his door. Bill opens the door, there's Abby Thatcher, looking like $1 million, got a spark in his eyes. And Bill says to Abby, what happened? And Abby says, I found religion. And Bill thinks right away, well, my gin will last a lot longer than his ranting anyways. But he says he didn't rant at all. And probably the greatest thing Ebby Thatcher said to Bill Wilson is, why don't you choose your own higher power? Why don't you find a God of your own understanding? And I really believe at that point for Bill Wilson, that's when it changed from a religious message to a spiritual message. All we're saying to you is come to believe in something that might be bigger than you. And I know in my case, it was the group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not a conspiracy theory that there's 2 million sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous walking around this earth. This thing works if we work it. The second thing I think the big book is geared towards is to love yourself again. And it's 12 steps. I've never met anybody walk through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous that has a good self-image of who they are. I've never met anybody walk through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous that loves the person they are. I've met hundreds of people walk through the doors of AA that are in love with themselves, but I've never met anybody who actually loves who they are. And I think the second thing the big book is geared towards in the practical program of action in its 12 steps is to love yourself again, to like the person you are, to come in here, become a productive member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then take that out there and become a productive member of society. The third thing I think the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is geared towards, in the doctor's opinion, it says that we are people that are full flight from reality. Folks, it just doesn't say that we're a little out of touch. And after that line in the big book, it goes outright mental defects. Isn't that promising to the newcomer? And I really believe the third thing the big book and the practical program of action in its 12 steps is to get us back in touch with reality. I don't know about you, but I always wanted to be someone else doing something else somewhere else. I was never quite happy within my own skin. The first thing, to find that power. The second thing, to love yourself again. And the third thing, to get back in touch with reality. I really believe those are the three components to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and its 12 steps. And if we can do that, we can become productive members of AA and then take it out there and become productive members of society. That's the real deal. After that meeting that night, my first meeting, my brother Paul said to me, I'm going to take you to 30 meetings in 30 days. He said, I don't want you to pick a home group. I don't want you to pick a sponsor. He did exactly that. After that 30 days, I picked the baby group of Alcoholics Anonymous to be my home group. I picked a guy named Jerry C. to be my sponsor. I thought he was an Italian gangster. He turned out just to be Italian. But Jerry was one of these guys that was in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, don't go looking for somebody that's like you. Look around for somebody that you want to be like. Jerry was one of those guys that I wanted to be like. He was in the middle of AA, you know? I can remember at our first business meeting, I was 2 weeks sober, and Jerry said, Eric, I just want you to shut up and say nothing. No problem, Jerry. And there's about 40 or 50 people at this business meeting, and the chairperson says, we need people to set up the baby group Sundays and Thursday nights. And Jerry puts up his hand. And I'm thinking, boy, this guy's made some, I'm already making good decisions 2 weeks sober. This guy's fantastic. Putting up his hand to volunteer the baby group Sundays and Thursday nights. He said, Eric will take care of Sundays and Thursdays. I can remember going up to Jerry when I was 2 or 3 months sober, and I said, you know what, Jerry? I got to be honest with you. Nobody does anything here at the baby group. I got to do it all. Got to do it all. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He said, Eric, who are you doing this for? And I'm doing it because I want to stay sober more than I want to drink. And if Jerry had asked me to dance naked on Yonge Street, I would have done it. Because I wanted to stay sober more than I wanted to drink. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous and you have plans or ideas for your life, please take an old timer aside and tell them about your plans and ideas. We want to hear them. I want to hear them. because I'm sure they're a beauty. I really want to hear them. Jerry also said to me, he said, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not a book that's meant to be studied. It's a book of instructions and directions that have to be followed for us to have the spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. He said, if studying the big book helps you to do what's in it, it's a beautiful thing, but the reality is I can know every dictionary meaning to every word in that book, and it's not going to do me a bit of good unless I put it into action. He said, this whole program is about change and action, Eric. It's about continuously doing it, the deal, changing and action, changing and action. Doesn't it say, and we read it every day, we must be rid of our old ideas or the result will be nil, nothing. Half measures availed us. Not even half. Nothing. Nothing. It says we have a daily reprieve on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And when you hear people say that, they always leave out the most important word. They always say we have a daily reprieve contingent on our spiritual condition. No, we don't. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. What am I doing today to stay sober? And then right after that, it says, right after the next line, it says we must carry God's vision into all of our daily activities. Whew. That's heavy stuff. Thank God at the end of step 12 where it says, what an order. I can't go through with this. None of us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to this program. No me, no Linda, no Mike, no Julianne, no Dr. Bob, no Bill, none of us. What we're trying here for is spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. That's what we're trying to do here. And Jerry made those things clear to me. Jerry wasn't one of these guys that said, we're going to wait 3 years to do the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous till you feel better. And the bottom line is you will feel better. You'll feel resentment better. You'll feel all that stuff better unless you do the steps. That's the reality to it. You know, you'll feel. I'm a real big believer that people come into Alcoholics Anonymous and they come in here and they get relief. And we need relief because we haven't had any for such a long time. The only problem is relief is always temporary. Always temporary. If we're looking for the freedom, we have to do the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And why not do them right away? Alcoholics Anonymous works in the good times and it works in the bad times. I'm just going to take a few more minutes, okay? And then, okay. Works in the good times and it works in the bad times. Just a little over 2.5 years ago, or 3 years ago, I discovered something that was on my tongue. And I let it go for a little while, and then in January of 2009, I decided to go get it checked. And it was cancer of my tongue. I was scared. I was scared. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. And thank God for my sponsor and the guys that I sponsored. Guys like Mike, who carried me when I couldn't carry myself. My sponsor also pointed something out that we read every day. It says, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not at midnight, right here, right now. And I had to try and practice that. The other thing that was happening to me, I was so full of fear there was no room for faith. And I was asking myself, you know, Eric, geez, you've talked so much about this higher power for so long. Why are you so scared? And I thought I was just like, is this stuff, what is all this stuff? I talk about it. You know, it's God. Why aren't I feeling it? And I realized I was feeling it through different people. And they were the ones carrying to me. And I'm a real big believer that nothing bad ever happens to me in my life. It takes me to new places in my sobriety. It takes me to new places in my life. And they always turn out to be blessings. And I might not see that blessing for a year, 6 months, 2 years. But I saw that blessing when I went to Akron, Ohio, and I spoke at Founders Day. And I told that story, and a lady came up to me that was 17 years sober. And she said, Eric, I had cancer too, and I went through the exact same thing you were going through. And I felt like a moral leopard. Thank you so much for your message of Alcoholics Anonymous and the hope. Because now I know I was just going through something, and my higher power was with me all the time. And I realized the blessing there, that I can carry a message like that to somebody else that was going through the same thing I went through. I had my operation, and they took a bit of my tongue out. A lot of people wish they took the whole thing out. They went in my lymph nodes here, and they took out my lymph nodes. Everything was clear. I didn't have to do any chemo. I didn't have to do any radiation. I'm a blessed, blessed man for that. And it's the people in Alcoholics Anonymous that carried me, and I had people praying for me all over North America. Linda, your friend Marilyn, knew about it, and she was just unbelievable. And it was just an unbelievable experience. Not that I wish on anybody, but I think it's taught me a lot. It's taught me to live in today. It's taught me to be about try and be as conscious as I can about today. And it's taught me to live life to the best of my ability. And for some reason, when I put God first, other people second, and me third, and I'm not trying to run around and satisfy my own instant desires, for some reason I lead a good life, and that doesn't make sense to a guy whose root disease is selfishness and self-centeredness. But for some reason, when I become God-centered and I become selfless, I lead a real good life. I sponsor a lot of guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that I take through the big book page by page. It takes us about 8-9 months to a year to get through of it, but I get to watch their lives change. And I'm constantly doing that because I love the feeling. A lot of people say, Eric, why do you keep coming to AA? You know, you've been sober an awful long time, 18 years. Why do you keep coming here? Could you imagine going to your next door neighbor and saying, well, you know, I've been going to the same recovery program 3 or 4 times a week, 5 times a week for 18 years. They wouldn't let you near their kids. Four years ago around this time, I'm giving Mike his 1-year medallion. And I get up there and I say a few nice things about Mike, but the whole thing to this is I look out in the audience and there's 8 to 10 people that I sponsor. Folks, this has absolutely nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with what you people have given me and the God of our understanding. And there's 8 people or 10 people sitting out on that audience that are productive, sober, busy members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have a feeling of gratitude that I can't describe, that I've been chasing all my life. You see, I don't care who you are. You have to have a purpose in life, whether you're alcoholic or you're not alcoholic. But before I came in here, I had absolutely no purpose in my life. I had no effectiveness in my life, and I had a feeling of uselessness and hopelessness. And when I looked out in that audience, I knew I have a purpose, I have an effectiveness, I have a usefulness, and I'm full of hope. Where do you get that? I've never found it anywhere but here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm at Bayview Christmas party a couple years ago, and These two older people are sitting there and they come up to me and they say, Eric, I'd like to thank you so much for what you've done for my son. And again, folks, this has absolutely nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with what you people have given me and the God of our understanding. And I said, you know what, Mr. and Miss Capon, he thinks I'm great and he's busy saving my life. And again, I have a feeling of gratitude that I can't describe, that I've been chasing all my life. Purpose, effectiveness, usefulness. Where do you find that? And people wonder why I keep coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sitting at the phones, 2:34, doing my phone shift. I did it for years when I was in Toronto, the 10th of every month. And I get a call from this girl, and she's hammered. And I think, what a waste of time this is. Talked to her for about 45 minutes to an hour. A little over a year later, I'm speaking at a one-year medallion. And this girl comes up to me and says, Eric, did you ever work the phones at 234 Eglinton? I said, yes, I do. She says, my name's Michelle. Do you remember me? I said, oh yeah, Michelle, I remember you. She said, I just celebrated your sobriety. I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me that night. And I have a feeling of gratitude that I can't describe. Purpose, usefulness, effectiveness. You see, I really believe my purpose on life today is to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to the people that still suffer. Folks, we got the greatest deal in town. Boy, oh boy, are we blessed people to be here tonight. I always end my talks with a little story. It's about an old man walking down a cold and dark road. In the middle of the road, he sees a snake. And the snake says to the old man, please, sir, pick me up and nurse me back to health. I'm dying. He says, I can't do that. He says, you're a poisonous reptile, and surely if I was to pick you up and nurse you back to health, you'd bite me. And the snake said, not if you save my life. So the old man picked up the snake and put him on the inside of his jacket. And when the snake got to feeling a little bit better, he bit the old man. And the old man threw the snake back down to the ground. And he looked at the snake and he said, I thought you said you wouldn't bite me if I saved your life. And the snake looked at him with a snickering grin and said, you knew what I was when you picked me up. My friends, if you're in the confines of a bar room, cocktail lounge, or even your own living room, and you decide to take the plug out of the jug or the cork out of the bottle, rationalize it, those that'll listen. Justify it to yourself. If you've been here, and if you know me, and if you met us, you knew what it was when you picked it up. Thank you so much for having me at the Ventura County Conference.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.